All right, excellent. Well, I'm pleased today on another episode of the InsurTech Leadership Podcast to be joined by Roger Ferrandis. He is the head of partnerships at Sixfold. Sixfold builds AI for insurance underwriters, and it's now running inside carriers like Zurich, Guardian, and Skyward Specialty, which together represent hundreds of billions in written premium. This conversation matters right now because building the model is no longer the hard part in insurance AI. The hard part now is getting underwriters and carriers to actually adopt it. Roger runs partnerships, so we'll get into how Sixfold lands big carriers, why it leans on systems integrators and reinsurers to scale, and what it takes to expand into Europe. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. So off air, we were just chatting about the World Cup. And you mentioned you're from Spain originally and spent significant time in the UK. So maybe we could just start. You could share a bit about your background and how it led up to where you are today.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I lived in the UK for 7 years. Originally from Spain, I started working in insurtech since the beginning of my career. I landed an internship at an insurtech. It was like a marketplace for brokers called I'm Free. It no longer exists, but I was running marketing operations there. And then with some of the colleagues that I made at that company, we created what today's still existing company, WeAnalyze. So WeAnalyze, when it was in the insurance space, used to gather online data about businesses, structure it and serve it to underwriters, so they could compare the data online with the data brokers sent. It was about understanding if there's any mismatch with what the broker is saying and what the online information is saying, basically. So we started in Spain, and right after we built the company, I moved to London to start expanding the company internationally. We grew the company to 25 employees. We raised $3 million. We got clients in 3 different continents. And then we ended up pivoting towards the banking industry. We found a lot of traction in that industry, but I found that I enjoyed insurance a bit more than banking. So I started thinking about my next move. And since, I was thinking about my dreams, one of my life dreams was to move to New York and live in New York. I discovered that thanks to my background, that was possible. And then when I was trying to find similar companies to WeAnalyze, I found Sixfold, and I found that Sixfold was already talking about AI. And so it felt like it was the most innovative technology for underwriting, which was my background. So I got in touch with Jane, I got the interview process, and I think it was a very natural transition because at WeAnalyze, I was the head of operations. So I was doing a little bit of sales, a little bit of product, a little bit of project management, and I discovered that partnerships is more or less the same, but working closely with partners. So moved to New York around 8 to 9 months ago, and so far loving it.
Great. So I'm curious. You mentioned that your prior company pivoted toward banking, but you like the insurance side better. What is it specifically that you like about insurance or insurtech?
I think insurance from the outside doesn't seem to be the most interesting industry. But when you're inside and you understand that everything you see, everything you interact with is insured, and for that policy, you need an expert in that topic that understands the risk, and all risks are quantifiable. I found that really interesting. And when I started talking to some people in the industry about risks like how do you underwrite a satellite or a space rocket, or whole countries against catastrophes, right? I think that's what got me very, very invested.
Cool. So Jane is actually, and that's Jane Tran, has actually been on the podcast before. We discussed more on the product side. So, you're focused on partnerships and maybe more oriented to the go-to-market side. what do you think you see in your role that maybe the product team doesn't, or the product team maybe depends on you for to get kind of an insight into what's happening externally?
Yeah. So I think I'm in a very interesting position because I talk to other insurtechs who also talk to carriers, and everyone is using AI to develop their own product. We are, of course, and we are an AI native company. So that is giving me the vision of where is the market going, or where it looks like it's going, and I gather that market intelligence and feed that back to product. So I think the transition we're saying is companies used to be SaaS companies with one solution, one platform. But right now, we are thinking more about how can we embed it everywhere where the underwriter operates in a seamless way. So how do we become an ecosystem player where our AI intelligence might not be visible, might not be offered as a platform, but is connected to all the data ecosystems inside the insurance company to make sure that we are making the underwriting process as intelligent as possible. So I'm having conversations with system integrators, with data providers, with underwriting workbenches, with pricing engines, with policy admin systems. All of them have something to do with underwriting. And we want underwriting to not be isolated. It's not an isolated department. It interacts with everything. So our intelligence also needs to interact with all those ecosystems. So that's more or less what defines the strategy. Is about becoming more accessible and more available everywhere where underwriters are operating and interacting with.
And as you try to roll that out and you have these various conversations, is it more about finding some key partners to go deep with to begin with, or is it more about trying to, cast as wide a net as possible and maybe not as deep, but going sort of wider, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I would say there's both approaches really. We have some partners where we have a very good relationship with, like Munich Re and their Realytics underwriting platform. And so with those, we realize that the potential is huge because we can leverage the Munich Re relationship to do that offering of the platform and the underwriting intelligence to maybe all the clients and partners of Munich Re. So there's some strategic partnerships. Another one like Microsoft, for example. We have a partnership where Microsoft customers can use Sixfold through the Azure cloud, and they can get access to our services through the Azure marketplace. So I'm thinking we need strategic partnerships, but we also need to make sure that we have at least one in each one of the pieces of the ecosystem, right? So I'm talking to policy admin systems. I'm trying to define use cases in which their pricing engine can send back data back to our underwriting intelligence. So we also consider premium estimations as an insight to make underwriting decisions or suggest underwriting decisions. I am talking to the main data providers of the industry. Nothing public yet, but the 2-3 that everyone are using. So it's about, we have some strategic partnerships, but we also want to make sure that we have at least one partnership in each one of the pieces of the puzzle.
Got it. And so, everyone, as you said, everyone seems to be working on some sort of an AI solution these days. Where do you find these initiatives typically stall? Is it like the data? Is it the risk team? Is it the underwriters? Is it third parties? What are your observations?
I think what I'm finding, and sometimes I participate in commercial conversations with prospects, with my sales directors and our partners. And sometimes what I find is some level of skepticism around AI, right? So I think what's happening everywhere in all the corporations is that the leadership team knows we got to use AI. So they ask somebody else to figure out how to use AI. And then that person needs to do a risk assessment of using AI. And the experience for a lot of people is maybe using ChatGPT or Claude. And sometimes those AI's models make mistakes. And
Yeah.
so there's a process in which we need to show them how we deal with those mistakes, how we deal with those inaccuracies, how we tweak the models to get to a point where the accuracy level is high enough that we gain their confidence, right? So I think it's a great process of interacting with underwriters and teaching them and let them play with our solution. But that's probably one of the conversations or one of the processes we always need to go through.
And what kind of helps make that transition and actually get someone to trust the technology, or at least trust Sixfold's technology?
So when we do let's say a POC or a demo, we basically get a bunch of submissions. They already know the decision of those submissions, but we don't know them. And then they send us a few underwriting guidelines, right? So we put that through the AI brain, and then the AI brain comes up with a decision. And then we sit down with them and we compare those decisions. If there's a decision that is not right, we understand the reasoning from the underwriter, and we grab that reasoning and put that back to the brain. So the brain learns how the underwriter thinks. So we're not just putting as an input a bunch of data, but reasonings on how underwriters make decisions. With that iteration, we get to a point where at least 90 or 95% of the outcomes of the brain are the same outcomes. The underwriter will have the same decision. When they see that level of accuracy, that's when we gain their confidence. And then we've probably done that test with 2 or 3 underwriters. But once we have their buy-in, that is expanded to the whole team of underwriters.
And as I understand it, the new AI underwriter has the capability to take a case to bind ready. Are there any of your clients that are comfortable with straight through at this point, or is everything still human in the loop? And do you see that ever truly getting to straight through, or a higher percentage getting to straight through?
I think that's the golden question, right? Is underwriting ever going to be fully automated? We're not thinking about trying to get there. It's not the purpose why we exist. We think about amplifying the capacity of the underwriter, right? If an underwriter used to deal with 1 submission every hour, we want them to be able to deal with 4 submissions and become more efficient. We have some clients who feel more comfortable with automating more, and some clients who feel less comfortable, and we meet both of them, right? There's some clients who say, if Sixfold says this is a perfect submission, a 5 out of 5 in appetite risk, just bind it. Like we don't even look at it. And then there are some other clients that say, well, we'll take a look just to make sure where this is coming from, and then we'll bind it. And maybe it's 1 minute, but they're still in the loop. With the new solution, the AI underwriter that we launched a couple of weeks ago, the idea is to automate everything that is manual in the process, right? So if you need to send a referral, if you need to structure the data, if you need to do some cleanup, we just prepare the case and get it as close to binding as possible, and then the underwriter can check what needs intervention, and maybe sometimes it's just 3 clicks to approve something, or maybe they have a question on the risk and they can interact with our chat and just get the information they need and then get that through.
And you mentioned efficiency of underwriters. is that primarily what the focus is, or is it loss ratio, quote to bind? Are there, particular metrics that you're tracking or your clients are tracking to, see the efficacy of the solution?
Yeah, so I think there are benefits that are linked to other benefits, right? If you are more efficient, you can be more profitable. So the way our clients are measuring our success or the return of investment is how much time am I saving per case, right? And we've seen some clients where they save 50% of the time per submissions. Another metric is quote to bind ratio. We've seen cases where that's been increased 15%. And then another case is the gross written premium per underwriter. If I give my underwriters the capacity to underwrite more policies in the same amount of time, what is the return? So the gross written premium per underwriter, in some cases, we've seen an increase of 30%, right? So you can say it's about efficiency, but I think it's about being smarter, and then that causes all those other benefits around profitability.
And is there, you've kind of hinted at some different examples, but is there possibly an example you could share of sort of what before and after looked like within the organization or the underwriting process, with Sixfold?
Yeah, so I think, do you mean before and after in an insurance company, before using Sixfold and after? Yeah. I've seen a client that they reviewed all the submissions coming from the brokers. And the backlog is, I don't have enough time to do this, right? And so they have to, there are submissions they never look at. And then the time it gets to them to respond to the broker might be too long, might be 7 days. We know that the faster you are, the more likely you are to win that business, right? So only, and this is only one of the insights that we offer, only with a score, only with telling them how to prioritize submissions, that's a huge value, because there are submissions automatically disqualified. You no longer need to waste your time in looking at something that is not within appetite. And then you can focus your attention on those submissions that are better aligned to your appetite, that you are more likely to buy, and that is, submissions that are easier to underwrite. So, and that's only one little layer of what we do. Yeah. But just with that, there's a before and after that changes the whole game.
And maybe tell me a little bit in your role in partnerships. You mentioned systems integrators, and how do you choose partners on that front? Are they helping you sell, or are they more just giving you more leverage on the deals you're able to sell, or Sixfold's able to sell itself?
Yeah, so it depends. The main intention for me in partnerships, and maybe it's 80% of what we are doing at partnerships, is increasing those sales opportunities, right? Knocking on doors where we're not knocking at the moment. Showing the client that we can be integrated seamlessly makes them more likely to get our services. And so with system integrators, for example, the role is very interesting for us because they have an experienced vision of what's going on inside the insurance company. They know what's the tech stack they are using. They know what are their workflows. They know what are the systems. So we might not have access to that information or that layer of intelligence. They are the ones who help us envision how can Sixfold become more intelligent and more integrated into whatever the insurance company has inside, right? So yes, they create opportunities, but they also help us sell in a smarter way, because we are not pitching only Sixfold, but we're pitching what are the benefits Sixfold can provide within your organization, knowing this is what you're using and knowing these are your workflows.
Got it. So when you started, was there any kind of a partner motion at Sixfold? And like how have you evolved it from where it was to where it is?
Yeah, so there were a couple of partnerships that we still have, and that I love and have a good relationship with.
Yeah.
But it was mostly the time invested in partnerships was just the time that some of the people in the organization had free, right? And they realized that they couldn't invest more time in partnerships, and they needed someone who was full time dedicated to it. And so when I joined, I looked at the partnerships pipeline. I created an assessment process in which I will qualify those partners depending on how much they can help us based on our objectives. And then based on those scores, I will prioritize more or less the conversations we were having. And I think when I look at the flexibility of Sixfold and I learn more about the product and all the 100 ways in which clients are using Sixfold, that's when I realized that the partnerships strategy has to be about flexibility and offering our clients more and more ways and more places in which they can use Sixfold and benefit from it.
And I've had a conversation recently with someone at like a top 5 carrier, and they seem to be going down the road of trying to build it themselves. And I'm curious how much you're bumping up on that now that there are so many AI tools available that kind of empower people with a variety of skill sets to get leverage from AI. And what are some of your talking points around the whole build versus buy decision?
Yeah, I think this always happened, right? Even before AI, a lot of insurance companies were trying to build some solutions themselves, and some of them are successful and some of them aren't. And I think when I think about why an insurance company would do it internally, I completely understand that they want to save costs and they want to have a higher power of management of the solution and so on. But I would say, we've been around for 3 years. We've made some mistakes and we've learned from them. And every startup makes mistakes and learns from them. And every company goes through the trial and error stage, right? We're at the point where we are escalating. We have 0% churn. We have good logos. We know how to do it. We know how to do it in different languages, in different countries, in 50 different line of business. So if you want a solution that it's going to work from day one, we're here. We're here to talk. If you can wait and spend millions and I don't know how much time it will take them, that's another bet. I'll say on building it yourself, AI, Cloud, Codex, we know they're great solutions to build other solutions. We also use them, but we are constantly doing a benchmark test against those models. So we're saying we're being 40% more accurate than an out-of-the-box model. And the reason being is our model has been trained only with underwriting information for 3 years. So everything it knows is underwriting. Whereas a model that you haven't trained yet still needs to go through all that learning process. And going through that learning process means that you need to educate the model, you need to feed it with the right data, you need to train it. Again, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of investment. So those are the two options, right?
So you alluded to, international aspect, multiple countries. Like, how much of your partnership strategy is focused on the U.S. market? If it's focused internationally, is that, partly sort of the network effect you were talking about at the very beginning, or is part of that trying to give the company access maybe into markets that a direct sales approach isn't necessarily feasible at the moment?
It's exactly that. So my role is global. I am dealing with partners in the UK, in Poland, in Switzerland, in Latin America, and of course in the US and Canada. And what we think is it's really hard to enter a new market. And I come from Europe. I try to sell to Europe. It's 27 different languages. I don't know how many cultures, 20 plus countries with 20 plus ways of selling, 20 plus ways of establishing a relationship. And so it's really hard to enter a new country, a new market, if you don't know anything about the market, the regulation, their way of selling. So we see that partnerships can be a way to unlock that. So, for example, we recently announced a partnership with Adnovum. They're a consulting group, system integrator, based in Zurich. They are already having commercial discussions with top tier carriers in Switzerland because they have the relationships, they know their needs, and they know how to sell to them. And so they are a key player for us to expand into the Germany, Austria, Switzerland region as they share language and they share clients over there. There's another one called Solars, which is a system integrator based in Poland, but they have clients in the UK, they have clients in the US, they have clients in Poland, and so they're being great at having those conversations, identifying where our solution can be beneficial, and then opening those conversations for us. And the same is being replicated in the UK, in Latin America, in Canada, and even in the US. It's all about knocking on doors we're not knocking at the moment.
So I guess if you were successful in your strategy and were to look out 3 years out, I don't know if you can even look that far out these days, but let's just say 3 years out is a reasonable period that you can think about in this pace of things these days. What would success look like to you?
I think to me, we will be seeing the big players working with Sixfold. And I mean, when I say the big players, I mean the big insurtech players. And we will be part of their offering, right? And we will have a global footprint. That is what success looks like to me. I think it's about making Sixfold available everywhere where we can operate and expanding our regions and expanding our networks. So landing tier one customers in India, in Australia, after we have already done so in other regions, that will mean partnerships have been key for us to get a global footprint.
Great. Well, Roger, I appreciate having you on. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
No, really. You got me thinking on the build yourself versus buying. And I think, again, I will reiterate that. Just think about if you have time. Because by the time you buy it, you build something yourself, the whole technology has changed so much that you need to rebuild it.
So maybe if you have one more second, I'll ask a follow-up to that specifically. So you mentioned the sort of, I guess we'd say, carrier leader who says, they've at least gotten as far as say, we need AI, and then they throw it down to someone to go after it. What advice might you give them instead of just, tossing it over the wall to somebody and hoping for the best? What might be a better approach to take?
I think it's always easier if you try it, right? We're an underwriting solution. Underwriters have to try it. And so, yes, we can sell to C-levels, but if underwriters are not happy with our solution, nothing's going to happen, right? Or maybe we have a 1-year contract and then that ends. So there has to be a way in which you can try AI, and there has to be a way in which you can train AI to be better. Those are the basics.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, excuse me. Roger Ferrandis, Head of Partnerships at Sixfold. I appreciate you joining me on the InsurTech Leadership Podcast.
Likewise, it was a pleasure. Really enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Joshua.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.